Hello everybody, welcome back to OCHD and welcome back to another Jumputi Heroes predictions video. If you like these kind of videos, please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most anticipated feature festivals in Jumputi history, which is of course Siren. Now I say it's one of the most anticipated, maybe for a lot of people watching this video that's not necessarily the case. I mean, it's not that popular a series, but this feature festival a long time ago did indeed win a Jumputi players fan vote to be a feature festival, to be a full event. Now, Siren is a series that I actually really like. I really like Siren. It did get cancelled, but that doesn't really say anything about the quality of the series necessarily. Some very good series in the history of Jump have got cancelled or have got sort of rushed endings, you know, quickly put together endings that weren't really what the final product was supposed to be. And I think Siren's ending is good enough. I think it's good enough. You know, when you look at the amount of shit the Kimetsu no Yaiba ending gets, or like the Toriko ending gets, the Siren ending is, I would say, fair enough. I will take this moment to say, if you haven't read Siren, it's basically unavoidable that I'm going to be talking about spoilers here, and I do recommend reading the series, so if you haven't read, probably best to click off now. It is available on the Shonen Jump app if you do want to give it a read. It's tricky because I really do recommend reading it. But if you're playing Jumputi within the next week or so, you are going to probably be spoiled on a lot of aspects of the series, which kind of sucks. But it is what it is. That's how these games work. So Siren, as I mentioned before, not that popular. It will actually be the lowest selling series to get a feature festival on Jumputi Heroes, of the series that are included in Jumputi Heroes that have got on a feature festival, of course. And there are some huge series that still haven't had one. You know, Dragon Quest, Dai's Grand Adventure, or Captain Tsubasa. And especially in the case of Dai, I think a lot of people thought when the anime drops it was going to get an event. That didn't happen. I think some people thought when there were like world events going on, like the Olympics and stuff and football tournaments, maybe Captain Tsubasa would get one. That didn't happen either. There is a World Cup coming up later this year, so maybe there's a little bit of hope for Captain Tsubasa, who knows. But the devs have, I mean, they've come out and said they don't really know how to do sports and a sort of non-battle series as a feature festival. I would say that maybe they're worrying a little bit too much, because last year they did the Hot Spring Heroines event. It wasn't a feature festival, but it was close enough in terms of the amount of characters included. And most people enjoyed that, so I mean, making, you know, instead of making like an ensemble event out of it, if it was, say, just Yuna's Haunted Hot Spring characters or whatever, I think you could have made a feature festival there, and people would have been fine with it. I would have been fine with it. I don't know about everybody else, but I definitely would have been fine with it. But in the case of Siren, they're probably not going to have much trouble making a feature festival. It's a pretty typical battle shonen. I would argue it's actually got a very good story, and I don't want to go too much into the story because, like, obviously there are going to be spoilers in this video, but I just don't want to bait everything out from the get-go. I want people to at least go have a look and see if it's for them. But I mean, if you want like an idea of what it's about, maybe like it feels a bit like a mix between maybe like a very tame version of Gantz, and there's a few elements in there that do feel a lot like Bleach, I would say. There's sort of similarities, I don't know. And, you know, the characters are quite lovable. It's quite good. It's quite good. And that would explain maybe why it got voted to be a feature festival. And it is kind of bizarre that... I mean, if you look at, like, series rankings and stuff now, there are series currently being printed in Jump that have higher recorded numbers of sales, that haven't even been added to the game yet. And there are plenty of other series that are like monoliths of Jump that either aren't included in the game, or they've only got like a handful of characters. They've never had a full feature festival. So it's an exciting time for the Siren fans. The issue I had with making predictions was it really depends on how confident the developers are in this series doing well. There's no real risk here, because this is one event which, if people are interested in it, they will pull on it, and if they're not, they're going to save for the next event, because they know the next event is a celebration event, 21 million download celebration. So they know, A, that's going to be some extra rubies, some extra goodies, some extra tickets, whatever, and there's going to be some crazy characters dropped. The most notable of which is probably going to be Uzui Tengen from Kimetsu no Yaiba. We are all expecting him to be added in that event, and after recent episodes of Kimetsu no Yaiba, I think that that event is going to do so well, it almost doesn't matter at all how well the Siren event does. So there's no real risk here for the devs, it's just time they have spent that they're going to put an event in. Bear in mind, we also have a new game mode that's supposed to come out this month that might well come out alongside Siren, so that's going to sort of fill out the content a little bit. We have like the ticket pool update and some other stuff, and then seemingly the calendar has been changed quite a lot compared to what we thought it was going to be. And so if this Siren event runs until the end of February, the 21 million downloads is either half of March, in which case the crossover event in March is much shorter than we thought it would be, or there's going to be some kind of overlap. And if there's some kind of overlap, then even less even less risk. The Siren event is sort of just a prelude to the release of another Kimetsu no Yaiba Limited. It's a weird situation, I've got to say. I really thought by now the Siren event would already be happening. I thought Boruto would be over. The timings just didn't quite line up the way I thought they would. Maybe I should have seen that coming, I don't know. But yeah, you know, loads of people will have already spent on Naruto and Boruto. Loads of people will be saving for either the 21 million downloads or Hunter x Hunter Yu Yu Hakusho or the anniversary. So they probably anticipate quite a few people skipping, except for the people that specifically voted for it or specifically wanted to see it. And then those people will go for it. And so I don't really know, like, is this the only event we're going to get for Siren? Or do they have in the back of their heads, let's leave a few things, and then if this event goes down well, maybe we release another Siren event later on. Maybe we just sprinkle it into upcoming celebrations, crossovers, whatever. That's where I've had trouble with my predictions, because there are characters that I would be absolutely gutted if they weren't included in the game, but at the same time, like, they're only realistically going to add like 8, maybe 9 characters for this event. If we're dreaming 10 characters, or maybe like 9 or 8 in a legend summon. But I don't see I don't see them going absolutely crazy, and I kind of don't see them doing a second Siren event, if I'm being honest. I think this will be the only one. So if I am to go into this thinking these are the only Siren characters that are going to be added to Jumputi, who are we going to get? That becomes very difficult. And sure, you could say like certain big fights could be saved for crossover events and stuff, or maybe like certain characters could just be added as like a standard gadget here and there. Because they've done it in the past, you know, characters that we thought weren't going to be added to the game or weren't going to get a version 2. And then it just kind of happened at some point in a random crossover event, in an event we weren't expecting it to happen in. So maybe, say for example, a character that I've really wanted to be added to the game, Hiryu Saga, who is from Siren, maybe he wouldn't get added in this event, but that doesn't necessarily mean he couldn't be added later. Although I will say, the closer we get to this event, the more I feel like Hiryu might be the Chad of Siren, and he just never gets added. Like, they'll just release loads of content and he'll just never be put in. I don't know. My confidence is a little bit knocked by the fact that they released Amma as like a free-to-play, like a transcendent class unit. Admittedly, they did do the same thing with Uso Renkin, with Kazuki Muto. The protagonist is a transcendent class farmable event. Sure, he might get a version 2 later, might be a limited, might be a standard gadget, I don't know, whatever, but that is quite a blow to that series. And for Siren, again, Amma being farmable, quite a blow. She can 100% have a version 2, could even have 3 versions depending on how confident the developers were. But again, I don't think they're that confident. So let's start off with the limited. The limited character that is going to be holding up this event. There's only going to be one realistically from this feature festival. And I'm just, for each sort of position, I'm just going to list the one I think they're going to go with and the one that I'm really hoping they decide to go with. Which is tricky, but there you go. So I think the one I really want them to go with is Matsuri as the limited. She doesn't have that much on screen in terms of battles, but is definitely sort of the mentor slash stronger force within the series. I like to think of characters that we've seen in the past who have come along as limiteds, like Avhan from Dragon Quest. He's Dragon Quest only limited, and he's sort of the mentor, strong presence who comes along and fights one of the bigger bosses. I would like to see Matsuri fill that role as the limited. Yes, I know there is an obvious choice, and I think the choice they're more likely going to go with, and that is Ageha as the limited. Because quite often, when a slightly smaller series gets a limited, the go-to is just, it has to be the protagonist. It has to be. It's not that common that the character will be released just as the limited. Like, I think the only time I can think of that's happened, where the protagonist has come out and has just been limited and there's no other version of the character, is Giorno. And based on what we know about that event, there were definitely some changes, and there's a real possibility that Giorno was not even meant to be limited, and there was another Giorno that could have possibly been limited, and maybe things got changed around. We don't know that for sure, of course, and I don't know, it's a little bit strange. It would be a little bit strange if Ageha was just a limited to me. Now, there is every possibility that Ageha could have 2 versions in this event. That has happened before. Again, has happened with a JoJo series. Part 3 and Part 4 released the protagonist and then a limited version of the protagonist in Jotaro and Josuke. So, no reason why they couldn't do that again and just have a standard gacha Ageha and a limited Ageha. Could do like a free version of Ageha instead of a standard gacha if they wanted to, and then they could maybe do a standard gacha down the line in some ensemble event if they felt like it. I'm not too sure. I know for a fact that in terms of the powers in the series, they're referred to as psionic powers. Agehas are the most popular. People really vibe with Ageha, so seeing multiple versions of him, multiple versions of his powers in Jumputi, I think would work. I think a lot of people would be interested in seeing that. Ageha, as far as the popularity poll, is the most popular character as well, so it would make sense. But look, they're not going to release 3 versions of him. The max is 2 in this event. And I think them releasing 2 is maybe our only hope of seeing more content from this series later on. Like, if they release 2 Ageha now, and then maybe some other characters like Amma could get a version 2 in a crossover event, 100%. And maybe like a few other characters. Like, it definitely could work. But yeah, I'm hoping it's Matsuri Sensei. She actually, like, again, this is spoiler talk, but can't be helped. There is a fight in which she dies in what is essentially an alternate timeline, and then in the climax of the series, she gets to go and fight that enemy at full power within the world of Siren, and then that's like her big moment in the series. So I definitely would like to see her as the limited, because I think that is the best place to start. That is definitely the best place to start. I think Ageha is so much more likely, but I definitely think that is the best place to start if you intend to release more content for this series. And I think they do need to diversify. Like, we kind of go back to the same series every time for feature festivals. Some of them are running out of content. It's good to have another series you can go back on. Now, the next thing, the standard gacha, this is where it gets incredibly tricky. Because, realistically, if you were doing just like the first portion of the series, which is what I think they should do, I think most of the content should be from the first portion of the series, and then they should also be in this feature festival encouraging you to go and read the series, and then next year or like the year after or whatever, they could do a feature festival part 2, and they could do the second portion of the series, and they could include more characters there. I think that would make the most sense, and the only thing I would include from the latter portion of the series would be Matsuri as the limited. I would probably try and avoid spoiling too much during that event, but I mean, there's not a lot to spoil. There's a character early in the series that should kill her, but doesn't because of the ordered timelines, and then she gets the opportunity to kill him, and he's a very cool character, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. So I think that should be the only content from later, and all the rest should be from earlier, similar to the Katekyo Hitman Reborn Feature Festival #1, where a lot of the content was not from the final arc, or not from the future arc. We had Suna versus Byakuran. Everything else wasn't from that arc. It was from earlier. And to me, that worked quite well. And then they were able to revisit Katekyo Hitman Reborn later. Admittedly, that had the problem of loads of version 2s in the standard gacha. But in the case of Siren, you wouldn't have to do that. I mean, you could do that, but you wouldn't have to do that. So, for the standard gacha, the characters I would like to see in there, Ageha, obviously, because we need a standard gacha Ageha. It's my opinion that every series should have a version of the protagonist that is standard gacha. I know that's not the case for a lot of series, and I know for a lot of series that'll probably never be the case. But at least, if you're going to give a series a feature festival, there should be a standard gacha version of the protagonist. That's what I think. Whether that's in the feature festival or released at another time doesn't really matter, as long as it does get done. And then at some point you could do a free version of the protagonist, and at some point you could do a limited, and that's that. Maybe with some series you don't need to do the free-to-play version, but I mean, say for example, again going back to JoJo, Part 6 Jotaro could definitely be free-to-play. Part 6 Jotaro definitely, in my opinion, should be free-to-play. Anyway, other than Ageha, the characters I would like to see in the standard gacha are Oboro and Hiryu. Now, Hiryu, I think, has the highest chance out of those three of not making it into the standard gacha. Potentially, I mean, maybe doesn't make it into the game. Like I said, it really depends on whether they do what I said and focus only on the early portion of the series, or whether they jump ahead. But focusing on the early portion of the series, Oboro is one of the more popular characters. Amamiya is the second most popular, and Oboro is the third most popular. So I would personally like to see him get standard gacha, and I think he has a good chance. And then that sort of makes up the main cast, except for like a couple of characters. I mean, the main core of the early part of the series. You know, we would have Ageha at that point. We already have Amamiya, and then we'd have Oboro and Hiryu, and then I would like to see Kirisaki be like a free-to-play unit of some description. And then you've got the crew and the gang. you've got the main sort of protagonist for the early part of the series, with the sort of mentor type character of Matsuri being the limited. Now, the issue I have here with the standard gacha is that there are some characters that sort of appear not necessarily only in the second half of the series, but they sort of don't come into their own until later, and that is the kids of the, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like Elmore Tenjuin's sort of children, the ones she's raising. Those characters, like for example Kyle and Frederica, are also quite popular from what I gathered, and they have sort of like a pre-time skip and post-time skip version. I wouldn't necessarily expect to see the pre-time skip versions because they don't really do that much in the story. They have a couple of moments, but they don't do that much. But the post-time skip versions, yeah, I would sort of really expect to see those in the game at some point. I know that their designs are very cool, their powers are very cool, and I think they would just make for very awesome characters to be included. So, could they be the standard gacha? Like, could the standard gacha maybe not fill out the main sort of 5 that I was talking about from early in the series? And maybe it will include someone like Kyle. Maybe it will include one of the other characters that I think should be in this event, which is Kagetora. I think he's going to be like an event unit or something. Like, there's potential for them to sort of mess about with it a little bit. And I just think there's too many options for it to only be one feature festival. That's what I'm really struggling with. And I feel like some characters are going to be disserviced. And this has happened before. With Katekyo Hitman Reborn Feature Festival number 2, I felt like it was sort of really bad that we finally got Sasagawa Ryohei added, and he was a Transcendent class event and not a particularly good one. And then that was sort of it. Like he should have had a standard gacha version at some point. Maybe it should have been a version from him earlier in the series, and maybe they missed that opportunity. I don't know, but either way, it felt a little bit lame, especially with a lot of the characters being version 2s in the standard gacha. So what's gonna happen here? Because assuming there is no chance of a second feature festival, like who's getting the boot? Who's getting the treatment of being knocked down to event unit, and who's getting the treatment of just not getting in the game? I would argue that Endgame Ageha can be his own limited in another event. Same with Endgame Amamiya, and therefore those characters and the characters that they would counter can just be pushed aside and forgotten about until a later event. Doesn't have to be a Siren Feature Festival, can just be whatever. But for the standard gacha of this event, there are certain characters that kind of need to get in, because I feel like if they don't get in this event, they're just not getting in. So I've put in... I'm feeling Ageha, Oboro, and Hiryu. But if the devs are not feeling particularly confident, obviously Ageha would be the limited. I think Oboro would probably still be standard gacha. I think probably Kyle would get promoted to standard gacha, or would just be included in the event full stop as standard gacha. And then the third standard gacha is a little bit tricky. I don't know, maybe Matsuri Sensei? Maybe. I'm trying to think who like stands out a lot in the last arc. I mean, it could be version 2 Amamiya, but I'm assuming she gets the pass for this event. I'd probably say if they're not feeling particularly confident, maybe Matsuri Sensei. Although I don't think she's that popular, so maybe my idea doesn't work. I don't know. But anyway, for the events, I think the Catastrophe class event should be Grana. To be countered by Matsuri Sensei. I think he has one of the best designs, so even if people are not that interested in the series, they'll be like, oh, that guy looks cool. but also he is the one that has a showdown against Matsuri Sensei, so makes sense a catastrophe. Then I would say is it Dolki? I think it's pronounced Dolki. You gotta remember, I've read the Viz version of the manga. There is another version where the things are spelled quite differently, and so things get very confusing when I look at the wiki because they've got very different spellings of things. But I think his name's pronounced Dolki. He is from an earlier portion of the series, and so logically should be the one countered by like Ageha and the earlier characters. And then Grana is from much later in the series, but again, these characters appear earlier, so it's fine. You just don't have to use all the cutscenes, so it doesn't look so obvious that you're spoiling the end of the series. Then for Transcendent class events, I've got Kabuto Kirisaki and Tatsuo. I really feel like Tatsuo should be in the game, but again, if Hiryu's not in the game, Tatsuo's definitely not in the game. So if Hiryu gets bumped to an event unit, they knock out Tatsuo and they put someone else in the event. That could very well happen. And I think Kagetora definitely should be in the game. There's definitely an argument for him to be like a standard gacha or something. Could even, if you do Matsuri Sensei's Limited, could even include Kagetora in there. But I think just like a points event or whatever just would be fine for him, would be fine. And then I think we'll get a legendary quest, probably going to be like Nemesis Q or Elmore Tenjuen. But, again, depends on what portion of the series they're looking at. If they're looking at the later portion of the series, could be like Ageha's dad, could be like Nemesis Q's true form, could still be Elmore Tenjuen, I suppose. Could be that, I can't remember his name, but the dude who'd already been turned, he'd been turned into one of the taboo, but he like wasn't corrupted, and he was helping out Hiryu and Tatsuo. Could be him, but again, I don't know. I don't know. I do think, I feel very strongly that if they were doing the event, and if they are dropping Hiryu from standard gacha to event, which I can almost visualize Transcendent class Hiryu Saga, and it's like a red banner, he's a red unit, Hiryu Saga, and he's like Transcendent class shitty farmer ball. I can visualize it in my head, exactly the same as Sasagara Ryohei. Yeah, that could happen. I think if they're doing it, Hiryu is probably dropped from the main banner. Maybe Ageha stays, maybe they do Ageha and Ageha. I don't know. But I think the event characters definitely change. I think if it's limited Ageha, it's got to be endgame bosses, and there's sort of two. There's Amagi? I can't remember how it's pronounced. Amagi? He definitely should be like a catastrophe or something. Technically not the one that Ageha fights in his final form, though. Whether we'll get that character full stop, I don't know, but I feel like it's not a particularly popular character, so I'm kind of just going to brush over it. And then there's a few characters I'd like to see I think should be saved for later, like Shiner would be a really cool catastrophe class event for like a version 2 Amamiya down the line. So maybe not in this event. I still think Dolki will probably be added, because I got the impression Dolki was actually kind of popular despite getting bodied quite early. I don't know. But then maybe Grana doesn't make an appearance as an event unit, because if Amaga is the like catastrophe or whatever, they might save the Transcendent class units and the points events and stuff for more important to the main series characters. Like maybe Frederica or Mari might be like a farmable unit or something. Difficult to say, but something like that. I mean, you'll see it on the screen what I've sort of decided. Something like that. I am really looking forward to this event. I'm a little bit skeptical of how it's going to turn out. I'm not particularly confident. But I'm praying that the devs have some confidence in the series and we're going to see more content from Siren in the future. More feature festivals or just sprinkled in other events. Anything. And hopefully we eventually get a properly filled out roster. I feel like Siren, it's not that long. It's like 150 chapters or something. But there is enough there, in my opinion, that you can make at least 2 solid feature festivals worth of content. If not just drip feed content and 1 feature festival, that's fine. But I just really hope we get to see at least a good portion of the characters represented in the Jumputi art style. And I'm excited for this one. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I'm praying for us Siren fans that this event is gonna slap. We should know more about it within the next few days. We're gonna start seeing leaks and whatever, or not leaks, but like teasers and stuff. And what's gonna happen in February in regards to the 21 million downloads, in regards to the newer type of event with PSYREN and all this other stuff, I have absolutely no idea. But I'm excited for it, and I will look forward to covering that for you all. But until then, I will see you guys next time.